Just before I put the question, I am going to refer the Minister, as I have a Minister once previously, to Speaker's ruling 53.4 relating to reading speeches. There is an understanding that ministers with highly technical matters or matters which Minister of Justice, where the courts are likely to, if you like, hang on every word, have a lot of flexibility with regard to reading speeches and can read their entire speech. The speech that the Minister just read was one which I think could be fair to say was not highly technical, and therefore, while it's appropriate to refer to notes and sometimes to quote numbers in a similar way, I would certainly prefer if ministers could take some care to acquaint themselves with their speech notes rather than just to read them. The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the education legislation, there is absolutely no question that it desperately needs updating and consolidating. And I know that the education community, including parents, teachers, school trustees, principals, and students themselves, have welcomed the opportunity to discuss the objectives of our education system and the purpose of education. Why is it that we spend $11 billion a year on a public education system? Why do we make all kids after the age of 6 attend school? I know that people have welcomed that debate, and I know that that has been a wide-ranging debate, and that is one of the reasons why when I sat down with this bill, I came to the debate wanting to support what the government may have come up with, because I know there's been wide-ranging discussion about it. And unfortunately, I was very disappointed, because the bill reinforces the worst aspects of what we are doing now, and the one future-focused thing that the bill has in it is so far out there and so far based on no evidence at all that it's almost impossible to support in its current incarnation. But let me begin at the beginning with the education system objectives and priorities and the associated changes with school planning and reporting that this bill necessitates. The current government, and this in my view reinforces one of the worst aspects of the current government's policy approach, they have taken the view that the only learning that matters is the learning that can be assessed. The only assessment that matters is the assessment that leads to the accumulation of standards or credits, and that the only credits that matter are those that contribute directly to a qualification. And I think that the education system needs to embrace a much wider definition of learning and of student success than that very narrow one that is being now locked in this bill. And so that is why the planning and reporting requirements, the very bureaucratic planning and reporting requirements being imposed by this bill could be very damaging to the education system, because we know that despite the focus on qualification attainment and standards attainment that the government have had in recent times, kids are still leaving school without the basic literacy and numeracy requirements that they need to succeed after they leave school. And how do we know that? Because Bill English, the Deputy Prime Minister, told us that when he described young New Zealanders as pretty damned hopeless. And I think that we've got to be better than that, and we've got to have an education system that's better than that. We know that kids aren't getting the literacy and numeracy skills they require, because when international objective studies are done, like the PISA study is done, we find that our rankings are going backwards. And not just in terms of where we sit relative to other countries, but where we sit in terms of our own performance, comparing ourselves against our past performance, we are going backwards. Constantly testing kids, which is what this bill focuses on and locks into the education system, isn't going to improve student learning. So then we come to the communities of learning proposal. I passionately believe that greater collaboration and cooperation between schools and educators will be good for kids' education. But the communities of learning system imposed by this bill is heavy-handed, it's bureaucratic, it's managerial, and it is not in any way focused, or to the extent that it needs to be, on quality teaching and learning. And it's also not fair. So go back to July this year, when I got data from the Ministry of Education that showed that 32% of all of the funding that's gone into communities of learning thus far has gone into decile 10 schools, whilst only 1% has gone into decile 1 schools. The communities of learning proposal, therefore, is reinforcing inequality in the education system rather than tackling it, and that has to be one of our key objectives. The bill introduces a new proposal that allows students to start school in cohorts closest to their 5th birthday. And I'm open to the debate around that, and I'm looking forward to the evidence about that kids starting in cohorts are going to be better off than if they start simply on or nearest to their 5th birthday. I absolutely do not support a proposal that would allow kids to start school earlier than that. If it's a matter of weeks either side of their 5th birthday, then I'm open to a debate about that. If it goes earlier than that, then that's something that I've yet to see any evidence to suggest that that's going to be good for kids' education. I'm also interested in the debate around the establishment of the Teacher Competence Authority, and I'll very much look forward to hearing what the profession have to say about that. But it is a problem when the body that is going to oversee the Teacher Competence Authority is completely appointed by the Minister. If this is a self-governing profession, then surely teachers should have the ability to elect their own representatives. And at the moment, this government won't allow them to do that. They pay the full cost of the Education Council through their registration fees, and yet they don't have any say on how that council is run or what it says on their behalf. At least allow them an election for some of the members on the council so that they have a say in how it is administered. But then we come to the proposal that has perhaps resulted in the most debate, and that is the establishment of COOLs, or communities of online learning, which could, of course, see students sitting at home with a computer doing all of their learning at home without the peer-to-peer interaction that they get and without the face-to-face interaction with a teacher. And it completely ignores all of the research that says even in an online learning environment, the quality of the teacher and the quality of the interaction with the teacher is still going to be the thing that has the biggest impact on student learning, and yet this bill doesn't take that into account in any way. Kids learn a lot outside the classroom too, which is not purely academic, but actually contributes a lot to what they can achieve later in life, and this bill doesn't in any way accommodate that. It doesn't look at research that is coming from other countries, and look at the United States, where they do have fully online private charter schools. And an evaluation carried out in the United States found that some of these there was a pro-charter school foundation that conducted this research. It found that students attending these schools lost an average of about 72 days learning and reading and 180 days in learning and maths during the course of a 180-day school year. So that basically meant they lost all of their maths and they lost roughly half of their learning. And that simply is not a good basis on which we should be experimenting with kids' education in New Zealand. There's no real evidence base to support what the government are doing around COOLs. There is no doubt that online learning within schools is taking off in New Zealand in a good way and in a positive way. The idea that schools can be sharing teachers and sharing resources using online learning, that's good, and it has already been embraced by the education system without the need for legislative change. This bill goes much, much further than that. A couple of other points to raise before I conclude, but because we are going to have plenty of opportunity to get into the details of this bill when it gets to Select Committee. I'm interested in the proposal that the Minister has put forward to bring the legislation concerning integrated schools into the Primary Act, into the main Education Act, and we're very much looking forward to hearing what the integrated schools have to say about that, because they are the ones who will be most affected by that. And we support the changes that the government have made around the provision of career services and the disestablishment of career services, because we certainly need to do a much better job of careers advice in schools, and at the moment the system isn't working the way it should. This is one step. We need to go much, much further. The Labor Party's already set out a pretty concrete proposal to significantly improve the quality of careers advice in schools, and we certainly welcome the opportunity as this bill progresses to debate how we can further build on that and do that even better. So overall, Mr. Speaker, there is much in this bill that is worthy of debate and that is worthy of scrutiny and that will lead to, I think, some improvements to our education system. But there is more in the bill that is backward-looking, that is overly bureaucratic, that locks in some of the worst aspects of what we're doing now, and unfortunately those negative aspects of the bill make it impossible for us to support at this stage. We will continue to engage with this bill as it goes through the Select Committee. We will improve it if we can. We will look to the submitters for their very practical suggestions, and we will look to government for evidence to support the proposals that they are putting forward, because they have yet to put forward robust evidence for many of the proposals that are contained in this bill. And of course, we will keep an open mind as that process continues to unfold. But at the moment, as the bill is drafted now, it is not going to be, in an overall way, it is not going to be good for teaching and learning, and that is the thing that is going to have the biggest impact on student achievement and on what students end up leaving school with, and as a result, the Labour Party will not be supporting the bill's first reading.